VocalEye Almost Live Zoom Rocky Horror Highlights, hosted by Amy Amantea with special guest JJ Hunt.
So this is the official welcome to tonight's almost live virtual VocalEye. I'm Amy Amantea, the community outreach coordinator for VocalEye, and your host for these events, and also a member of the blind community. And I'm really happy to spend my Wednesday evenings with you all. At this particular moment, I would love to invite Deanna back into the space. And as you all maybe remember from last week, Deanna is joining the VocalEye team from Adler University and has been interning with us. And Deanna is going to offer us our land acknowledgement this evening. So Deanna, the space is yours.
Hi, everybody. If you've been around for the past few weeks, you've probably already met me. My name's Deanna Gestrin, and I'm happy to be interning with VocalEye. My family is from the Statliam Nation, specifically Haklip, which is in the Lilwat area. On my mother's side, I'm from that nation. And on my father's side, we have European descent, specifically English and Welsh. In a land acknowledgement, I was taught that it's helpful to name, explain, and relate. So I would like to name that we are presenting to you from the ancestral, unceded, traditional territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Peoples. I'd like to explain that the importance of acknowledging the originators of the land is valid. It's so that we can sort of experience this awareness in a different way. We are able to appreciate the space that we live on, that we play on, that we work on. And that came on the backs and challenges of people who were oppressed. So it's not comfortable to talk about that. But when we do acknowledge it, we're acknowledging the wrongdoings of the past. Therefore, we are learning to be more comfortable with this truth and more comfortable talking about this challenging topic. We all know it's kind of uncomfortable, and the more we do it, the more we are able to sit in that space and move ourselves forward. I would like to relate by creating a bridge between all of you here in this community and the story of my own family. I will share with you that my parent, my grandparent, and 5 further generations of grandparents attended residential school in Canada. And I like to leave a little bit of space there because it's important to sit in that space and to be in that space, that awareness space of what that means, the impact of that. I believe that healing can happen with intentionality, personal and community awareness, truth sharing, and that might be sharing your own truth or sitting with somebody who's sharing a truth, compassion, that can be, again, internal or external, advocacy, allyship, and policy change ultimately. Part of the healing also comes from sharing or listening to what is uncomfortable. I really believe in this. What is uncomfortable, sitting with that discomfort. You know, we tend to want to pull away from things that are uncomfortable, but when we sit in that space, we actually start to change. We change the way we feel and experience, we change the way we think, and we change the way we act. Also, I believe that this type of collective awareness will bring about change over time. So that's where we become involved in the process. We listen, we think, we reflect, we have conversations. And when we all do that, we start actually moving as a society in a different way. So that's the goal, that's the hope. I want to lift my hands to you. So when we say all my relations, I lift my hands upward. My elbows are bent at 90 degrees at the elbow. My flat palms are facing toward my face at eye level. And I say to you, all my relations. And what this acknowledges is that we are all related and you are all my relations. So thank you for being here tonight with us at VocalEye. And I hope you all enjoy the show.
Thank you, Deanna. I enjoy very much listening to you speak and share your knowledge. I think it's super valuable, and thank you for offering that in this space. Excuse me. All right, friends, it's October the 27th, 2021. It's our Halloween episode. And tonight we're proud to offer you our almost live event number 61. I can't believe time has flown so fast. Tonight, we're going to experience the Rocky Horror Picture Show highlights. with our special guest, JJ Hunt. So let's welcome JJ into the space.
Hello,
I guess I could call
everyone.
you what, like describer extraordinaire?
Yes, I mean, hey, I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say no.
Now, JJ, you're in costume tonight. Tell us what you're wearing.
I am. So I am wearing my original, now 30-year-old Eddie jacket from my days being in the shadow cast of the Rocky Horror Picture Show from the Bloor. So in Toronto, where I am dialing in from and where I am from, the Rocky Horror Picture Show first played, back in the 70s. At the Roxy, and then moved to the Bloor Cinema. And when I was going, it was at the Bloor, and I was at the shadow cast of the Bloor. I played Eddie for the most part. And so this is my Eddie vest. So it's a leather vest with a faux leopard print fur lapels. And on the back, there are some chains and the word baby written across the shoulders. And there's a sunburst coming up from the back. And then, because just for fun, my black t-shirt underneath says Pride. So this is my Pride t-shirt and my Eddie vest. And yeah, 30 years old, still fits.
Still fits?
Yeah, well, that's only because I was really fat back then too. So,
I was gonna say, you haven't been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic.
No, I got it all worked out.
And for folks that are just joining us, I'll let you know that tonight I'm wearing my fishnets t-shirt. So my fishnets go all the way down my arms with a black tank top. So you can, so that my fishnets stand out, and my dog collar, it's a faux leather dog collar with a rattly chain on it. So it's really, if you're dog lovers and you have guide dogs, it probably is very similar to a martingale type collar, but it is a little tight around the neck, if I'm honest. So there you go. We have come in our Rocky Horror garb to share a little bit about Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I'm having a hard time sitting still in my seat because I just am in love with Rocky Horror. And we've got lots of stuff that we're going to end up talking about in terms of content this evening. So we're going to go through all the characters, and we got some video clips to show, and we're going to leave some time at the end for folks to share their experiences and ask questions. So I guess, JJ, I wonder if there's something you maybe want to share with us about your experience with Rocky Horror before we jump into the content piece of it.
Sure. I was in high school. My high school girlfriend was Rocky Horror obsessed. And so therefore I became Rocky Horror obsessed. And so we did the Rocky Horror thing, the shadow cast. So the way it works is for a lot of movie experiences, you go to the theater, the movie is played, and there's a cast in front of the stage or in front of the screen that is performing at the same time. And that's what we were. We were in the shadow cast for
so it's like a hybrid. The movie's playing and there's actors on the stage.
And there's a live going on at the same time. So it was, really involved. We were really invested. Erotic Nightmare was the name of our troupe. And then we actually managed to do it. I don't know how we did it as a high school play. Mm-hmm. So, the regular music department was doing Hello Dolly. And we said, yeah, great, but we're kind of into Rocky Horror. So I directed the play at my high school. And so we had teenagers running around the auditorium in my high school in their lingerie and fishnets. And it was totally outrageous. I don't know how we got away with that. So that was that was a good part of my youth was Rocky Horror every Friday night at 11:30 at the Bloor Cinema. So, I'm dialing in Toronto. It's almost 10 o'clock now. And this is about the right time to start thinking about Rocky Horror for me is, getting in late into the evening. So what's your Rocky experience, Amy? What's it been like in your life?
Rocky Horror for me, I think I always wanted to grow up and be Frankenfurter. I think I seriously did. And we'll describe Frankenfurter for those that I wanted to be Frankenfurter. So I have been to many of I've never seen a shadow cast, and I've never seen the show, the play version of the show. I've only ever seen the movie and been to the cinema, and participated as an audience member. at the cinema, and we used to do that quite often. Although I have to be honest with you, I don't know that it's played here in Vancouver for the last, certainly not during COVID, but for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that there's going to be kind of a Rocky Horror revival.
Yeah.
But there have been many a Halloween where that was really the only costume. I wanted to either pull out a Frankenfurter with my big boots and my fishnets, or pull out a magenta look, or just be, every year I would come up with a different creative way of trying to be one of the cast members. And then of course, you do the time warp at every Halloween party you go to, because
Of course.
well, you kind of have to. And again, we'll tell you all about the time warp, and maybe we'll get up on our feet and do it if you're willing to participate, friends. So yeah, that's sort of my experience. And I wonder, like, JJ, you got a couple of kids in your house. Maybe they're too young for Rocky Horror. I don't know, but have they experienced it?
They have not. I mean, they just saw me putting this jacket on, putting on my vest.
Now they're
and
curious.
I was like, and they were like, "Oh, Dad, oh my God," like so embarrassing. Okay, guys, I can't convince them that I'm cool. There's nothing I can do to convince them that I'm cool. So a lot of the kids, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Someone's got to. In our circle, we got a lot of our kids who are, 13, 14 years old. And the big discussion is, are they old enough? And the answer right now is no. But then the follow-up is always, yeah, but how old was I?
How old was I? Yeah, I'm sure I was 14, 15 years old
exactly.
too.
So there's some stuff that's maybe a little saucy, but you got to be exposed to this stuff at some point. And, if it was good enough for us, it's probably not going to damage them too much, right?
I suppose, I think, if I think back to the kind of teenagers my generation was, so, I was a teenager in the 90s, I'm outing myself. But we didn't know as much as teenagers know today. They know way more than I ever knew as a teenager. They're way more woke. They're way more on top of like language and life experiences and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, maybe it is the right age. I mean, because I think there were things that I was singing along to in Rocky Horror that probably had no business falling out of my mouth as a teenager, but I didn't know what it meant. So I just sang it, So there you go. Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to get into what we're going to experience tonight. And I hope everybody else is excited to experience it as well. So just so that folks understand a little bit about our layout, we're going to start with some background. So we have some context, right? We've got some photos that we will bring up for those that have some partial sight and want to see them. And we'll just describe through all the characters. And then we'll play some audio clips, and we'll make sure that we set those up. But mostly, I mean, even though there's visuals because they're from the movie, it's very much an audio experience in terms of the type of music that is being shared, right? That's what we're trying to impart. And I will just let folks know right now, if you're not familiar with Rocky Horror, here's your content warning. It's a little raunchy, it's a little rude, there's some foul language. Happy Halloween. That's what it is. We're all adults in this space, so if you need to disengage for any reason, please make the space that you need to make to do that. So with that, JJ, I don't know, are you ready to Rocky Horror?
Let's do this thing. Let's do this thing. Awesome. I'm going to put it in your hands, JJ. And I wonder, should we get Rick to bring up that first photo, or is it too soon for you? We'll be there in just a minute.
Okay. I'm leaving it with you.
It can be up as long as it needs to be up. But so, I mean, let's just talk. Okay. Obviously, a lot of people know about Rocky Horror, but for those who don't, Rocky Horror is a sexy, campy musical tribute to B-movie sci-fi and horror films from the 30s to the 60s. And the basic plot of the film, it's the story of a young, newly engaged couple, Brad and Janet, whose car breaks down on a rainy night. And so they have to go to a nearby castle to find a phone so they can call for help. There, they discover a mad scientist named Dr. Frank N. Furter, who is hosting a strange convention of sorts. And it turns out that Frankenfurter is, in fact, an alien and a self-described sweet transvestite. And he's been working to create a muscle man to act as his own personal plaything. And wouldn't you know it, this very night that Brad and Janet show up is the night that muscle man is destined to be born and revealed to the castle's gathered guests. So an outrageous plot, just, goofy characters, wonderful characters, outrageous costumes. And then had this ultimate outrageous cult following. So it began actually as a musical, as a play called The Rocky Horror Show in London, England, 1973. And as a play, as a musical, it was really popular and it went international. It was in the States, it was in Australia. And so they decided, let's make a movie out of this. So in 1975, it was turned into a movie. And that's when picture was added to the title. So it became the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And then it was released into theaters and did poorly, terribly. It was not well received. In fact, it was actually pulled from a couple of cities before the movie even opened. It had done so poorly. So they quickly shelved it and they said, what are we going to do? Because we've spent some money on this movie and it's now just sitting there unused. And a producer, someone at I think it was Columbia or Universal who owned it, said, you know what, they were having some success with midnight screenings of a 1936 anti-marijuana propaganda film called Reefer Madness, infamous film Reefer Madness. And they've been playing it in a few midnight screenings. And, people would go and probably have a smoke and, laugh and make fun of this movie. And it was doing quite well and making money. Mm-hmm. And so they said, well, let's try and do the same thing with the Rocky Horror Show. It's kind of got some of those qualities. So the first thing they did was they redid the poster. So if we want to pull that poster up now, it's a good moment for it. They redid the poster to something a little bit more engaging, a little flashier. So the poster that's going to come up here features a big set of red lips set against a black background. And the lips are kind of downturned a little bit. So not a smiling set of lips, but slightly downturned. And you can, the perspective is if someone was lifting their chin just a little bit and biting their lower lip, kind of in a sexy, like, kind of way. And those are the red lips biting with the teeth biting the lips. And underneath it says the Rocky Horror Picture Show in blood dripping red letters. And then beneath that in white font is the phrase, a different set of jaws. And this was important because 1975, this was when the movie Jaws was being released. So they were tying into the most popular film of the day. This image with the lips biting, the teeth biting the lips, the Rocky Horror Picture Show dripping blood, the reference to Jaws was much more eye-catching, much more alluring. And they started playing the movie in midnight screenings, and immediately people got into it, and so they expanded and they played it in more cities, midnight screenings, and it was so popular and seemingly could go on forever. They just kept playing it and playing it. They never pulled it, and it is still in release. It is the longest run, what are we on now? Since 1975, it has been in permanent release, in perpetual release. And this month, October 2021, I went on to the Rocky Horror Picture Show official website. It is screening in over 300 cities in the US alone, plus Canada, plus Europe, plus Australia. I mean, this movie just will not die.
It doesn't die.
And it's because of the experience of it. It's not just the film, it's the full-on audience participation experience. So that's the basic background of the Rocky Horror Show.
Just for some context of this photo, JJ, the lips that you're talking about, because they take up pretty much the whole top third of the poster.
Yeah.
Are they animated lips or are they human lips?
This is a photograph. They had a model. I actually had the model's name at some point. I've forgotten it, but they hired a model, really glossy red lips, and took a photo. So it's a little bit like the Rolling Stones lips, but not quite, because the Rolling Stones is animated. That's a cartoon. This is a photograph of these red lips.
Okay.
And then the blood dripping letters from classic horror movies. It was an intriguing poster. It was it was iconic. I had this poster on my wall in high school for sure.
Awesome. All right. What are we going to see next, JJ?
So, well, then you got to get into the audience participation. So what does it look like? What is it like to be in the theater? Because truly, the reason it's lasted so long isn't just because of the movie. It's because it's an experience. So those early midnight audiences, they would go to see it over and over and over again, and they were pretty rowdy. And so they would start, audience members would start, and I think it started in New York and LA, they would yell things at the screen, goofy lines that played off of the dialogue that was already going on. And so they would just insert their own lines or, you know, do call and response to the movie just to make their other audience members laugh. And that became such a popular thing to do that you ended up with an almost script. So the audience has their own script to yell at the screen. And then to support the midnight screenings, local performance groups were organized and even hired to dress up and act out scenes along with the movie. This was what I did. This was the shadow cast. So when you went to the movie, and still in lots of places, if you go, you're not only getting that movie experience, you're getting a live theater piece and you're participating in it. And then audience members were like, well, if they're dressed up, I want to dress up too. So audience members are putting on their own fishnets and they're, you know, getting themselves in corsets and they're getting more involved. And then they started bringing props. So audience members would bring props that they could throw or deploy in concert with the film. So a small example, there's a wedding at the start of the film, and audience members would bring rice and confetti so that when the bride and groom leave the church and everyone on screen is throwing rice and confetti, everyone in the audience can throw rice and confetti. And then when it rains a little bit later on, audience members would bring squirt guns and fire squirt guns into the air so that it would be raining in the theater, just like it's raining on film. And then some audience members would pull like folded newspapers over their heads to kind of protect themselves from the rain, just like Janet does in the movie. So you would end up with this fantastic interplay. The cast of the shadow cast is interacting with the audience, running through the audience. The audience is yelling things at the screen and responding to moments in the screen. You know, there's a formal dinner party where Frankenfurter raises his glass and says, "A toast." And everyone in the audience goes wild and starts hurling pieces of toast around the theater. I mean, fantastic. This is wonderful. Although I have to say, so my theater, the Bloor, is now a fancy hot docs cinema. And they had a list of things that you were not allowed to do in the theater because they're playing it this year for Halloween. And that someone told me, I don't know if this is true, but someone told me that in that list of things you're not allowed to do is bring toast that has nuts and seeds in it for allergies. Right. I'm like, oh, come on.
No multi-grain bread.
No multi-grain bread for your toast. I mean, really, I don't know if that's true, but that's what I was told. So that's the kind of experience. You know, you've got the audience yelling, and it is important to note just how rude and crude and lewd some of the audience lines are. It's raunchy all the way through and through. But it is, you know, we've talked about this, you know, just before we went live. To go and see the movie in theater for the first time, it's almost impossible to follow it. If you're experiencing it with all of the audience yelling and screaming and the toast flying, and you can't follow the film. So this is actually a really good way, if you haven't experienced Rocky before, this is a great way to get a sense of the story and what's going on, so that if you're in the theater, you can fully you know, appreciate everything that's going around. So that's the overall experience of the
and I think truly too, it's like, you know, you get in there and unless you have access to the script, you don't know what's going to be yelled and when. And so it's this kind of this idea of going over and over again, and this idea of audience members, you know, having different regional things happening in different parts of the world where the show is happening. There's gonna be different things shouted. So if you're visiting a different place, then, you know, the spirit is there's no booing at the Rocky Horror Picture Show, right? You can yell out whatever you want, whenever you want to. And the audience sometimes catches on to what you're saying and they repeat it. And some people have gone so many times that they know exactly what to say and when to say it. And some people just sit there and listen and watch and go, oh, I'll participate next year, or whatever they do, right? But I think what I remember from being watching the film and interacting with the film this way is that nobody sits in their seat. Like they're, you know, they might as well have had no seats in the room at all. Like, this is not a, you know, you're in a typical theater environment, like a movie theater environment, but you ain't sitting.
No,
You were
no.
on your feet the entire time. So it's a bit like a concert to a
Totally.
movie with a play and audience participation.
That's right.
So-
And if there's a shadow cast, sometimes they'll be running into the, you know, up and down the aisles, and they'll get right into the rows of seats, and they'll, you know, perform to audience members.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a scene, man. It's a scene.
Yeah. It's awesome. Hey, how many times have you seen Rocky Horror?
Oh, well, between going to the theater, rehearsing for the shadow cast, and then doing the play, it's got to be over 100. I'm sure over 100 times. It just, yeah. In fact, when I started doing some research for this, I had I knew everything. I thought I knew everything. And then I'd look up pictures and I'd be like, oh, actually what I'm remembering is from my high school production. The pants weren't actually that color. In the movie, it's this color, but I remember it from my, you know, so I've had and I've seen it live. I saw it at I think it was the Bathurst Street Theater in Toronto. I saw a live version of it there a few times. It's been at like Stratford.
Did they do the same audience participation with the live version, or is it more like a traditional theater experience?
Usually the when we did the high school version, we weren't allowed, because it was high school. People weren't allowed to scream the most obscene things, but we as a cast went into the audience. That was allowed. At the professional theaters I've been to, they tend to, you know, try and get you to quiet down a little bit. Otherwise it's just overwhelming, and you don't get the story. And the musical numbers are fantastic. They really are great. So you need to save space for those, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Whew, okay.
So we talk about the visuals of the actual movie. So I mean, you know, we talked about the experience, and it is so much about the experience, but like the visuals of the film itself it's a low budget 1970s movie that's paying homage to even earlier B movies. So that's a nice way of saying it looks pretty cheap. Like the visuals are kind of intentionally cheap because they're making fun of or paying homage to, but they're also so low budget, kind of looks like it's an SCTV sketch sometimes. Like it's really low budget. A lot of the special effects are actually just flashing lights or beeping noises. Like there's like funny sounds in lieu of actual special effects. But like I say, the musical numbers are really tight. They're well choreographed. I mean, mostly because they've been lifted right from the stage production, but the scenes between those musical numbers, that's where it gets really cheesy. And if you've heard the film before, or, you know, you can watch it on Disney Plus. It's on Disney Plus now, strangely. I find that really
if it's on Disney Plus, I'm guessing it's got description, which would be interesting too.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it because I'm very hard film to describe. Musicals are, I mean, notoriously difficult to describe, because there's a lot of exposition in some of these numbers, and you got to leave them be. So it's tricky. But you might notice that the dialogue sounds a little bit separate from the video. Sometimes it's because the dialogue was recorded after the fact in a lot of cases, just because that's a cheaper way to do it. Yeah,
it has to be. I mean, there's no way of being able to get different camera angles when you're doing a musical number. Like all of that stuff gets done in post, like recording in post, right? Like
exactly.
You can't. Otherwise your song would sound like this all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Your voice, it goes all over.
Yeah.
And because this is cheap, it's low budget, you can hear that. It's really clear that the voices, the dialogue is kind of floating above the rest of the soundtrack sometimes. So that's
and because we're experiencing it on Zoom, and sometimes, you know, the audio quality is a little anyways, it's all gonna work out tonight.
It'll be perfect for us.
It's meant to be that way. Yeah.
That's right. And, you know, there's some interesting like film techniques that they use when they were doing this, because it was like it's an homage to an old sci-fi movie, an old B movie. they use some of the film techniques from old B movies. So they go handheld sometimes, which is unusual for a feature film. Sometimes they, the camera gets a little shaky because someone's actually holding it. That's, a bit of a throwback to some of the old sci-fi. They also zoom in on actors sometimes, which is, again, kind of unusual for feature films. It's a very stylized way of doing things, but they zoom in, and there are a couple of characters. I mean, the narrator speaks directly to us, so look straight at us, into the camera at us. And Frankenfurter a few times kind of does that thing that they do in The Office of like looking at the audience through the camera lens and like mugging for us, which is a very strange breaking of the fourth wall. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. And then there are these like transition wipes, which again aren't used very often. So wipes are these transitions from one scene to another. So instead of just abruptly cutting one scene and then starting the next scene, you add a transition. So the simplest version of that is like a slide from side to side. So the next scene will kind of slide into view and kind of push the other one aside. But then sometimes in Rocky, they do, they've got what's called a heart wipe or a question mark wipe. So you actually zoom in through the shape of a heart or shoot through the shape of a question mark. Again, it's a very stylized thing. You're making these choices very intentionally. They're a little bit campy, a little bit cheesy, and that's why they're doing it, right? Because it's fun. Star Wars is another franchise that does quite famously uses these kinds of wipes. But really, visually, what makes Rocky Horror what it is the costumes. The costumes are just outstanding. I was trying to think of how to describe the costumes in general terms, and what I came up with is it's like the coolest 1970s rock and roll high school kids raided all of the thrift shops in London and New York and took out all the coolest vintage clothes. And then on their way home, they found a box of corsets and boas from a trashy Moulin Rouge drag show. And then they took all those home. And while they were getting dressed up, they did their makeup while watching glam rock music videos. Like that's kind of the overall look of the costumes. And then we can kind of break those down character by character, but that's the overall look. And that's really what makes it is these costumes, these characters. It really is a character driven picture.
Well, speaking of characters,
let's do them.
Let's
go through them. So let's start with Brad. So we've got a picture of Brad and Janet here. We'll start with Brad and then talk about Janet. So Brad Majors is played by Barry Bostwick. This is Janet's fiance. Brad is a tall, thin white man with dark side-parted hair with big square glasses that are with dark frames that were kind of dorky in the 70s, but are actually now back in style, strangely. And when Brad arrives at the castle, he's wearing a tan windbreaker and kind of like steel blue-gray slacks. But then he very promptly gets stripped down at the castle, and what is revealed under these clothes are very high-waisted tighty-whitey underwear. So that's Brad. Janet,
a little bit of a geek.
A little bit of a geek, but a totally lovable geek that can, he can really rock a corset. We find out later on in the movie. He works it. Susan Sarandon plays Janet. This is Brad's fiance, young Susan Sarandon, very, very pretty, doe-eyed white woman with a cute upturned nose and curly shoulder-length brown hair that's held back with barrettes, and the barrettes are round. And one of the things that the audience members yell at her at some point is that her barrettes look like condoms in her hair because they're this round. Yeah, that's the kind of audience participation you get. And when she arrives at the castle, she's wearing a pink belted dress with a high button-up collar and flared knee-length skirt, and she's got a white cardigan on over top. And of course, she also gets stripped down. And when she gets stripped down, it reveals her white bra and slip underneath. And then she later tears the slip. So it gets a little bit shorter as the movie goes on.
Which is kind of a juxtaposition, right? Because Janet is like proper.
Yes, she's very innocent and very, oh my goodness.
Proper and
until toucha, and then things go south. Or I mean, hey, I think it makes her life maybe a little better. It seems. I mean, I'm just saying.
Awesome.
So then there's Riff Raff. So we can move to the photo of Riff Raff. Riff Raff is the butler handyman played by Richard O'Brien, who actually wrote the Rocky Horror Show, the original play, and adapted the movie as well. So this is kind of his baby. Riff Raff is a skinny, sallow white man with sunken cheeks, dark circles around his eyes, and he's got a classic horror film hunched back. He's balding and has long, scraggly blonde hair around the sides and back of his head. And Riff Raff spends most of the movie wearing a tattered, really filthy tuxedo. It's barely even a tuxedo anymore. So that's Riff. Riff's sister is Magenta, played by Patricia Quinn. And she's listed as a domestic, so she's the maid. Her costume, she's a pale white woman. She's got blood red lips, dark circles around her eyes again, and long frizzy red hair. And again, most of the film she spends in a ratty French maid's uniform, so a black knee-length dress with a white apron, fishnet stockings, lots of fishnet stockings, and a small lacy white cap that's kind of perched atop her dark red frizzy hair.
I might have gone as Magenta once or twice.
Yeah. You've got some elements of that costume in the wardrobe, do you?
I might have something hidden around the house.
So Columbia is a really quirky, interesting character. Columbia is a groupie. And she's kind of dressed like a sparkly circus ringmaster. This is very strange. So she's a petite white woman with short dyed red hair. It's like a cherry red hair. And she's got painted on arched eyebrows, bright red lips. And she wears a short gold, like a short length gold sequin tuxedo jacket, like a fitted tuxedo jacket. And she wears that over a sequined strapless top. She's got on sparkly tight striped short shorts and a red sequined bow tie. And she's got a gold sequined top hat on. And of course, fishnet stockings. So that's Columbia. And when we first meet her, she's sitting atop a jukebox. That's where she's pictured here. And then there's Dr. Everett Scott, who is a scientist, played by Jonathan Adams. Dr. Scott's a middle-aged white man with wire-rimmed glasses and a mustache. He uses a wheelchair and he's got a tartan blanket over his lap. This was one of those moments where I was sure it was a red tartan blanket, and it looked at the movie afterwards. I'm like, oh, it's more of a blue tartan. Why did I was sure it was red. Yeah, it's because the one I had when I was in the cast was red. And yeah, no, his is not so much. So he's a proper scientist gentleman, suit jacket and tie and whatnot. And of course, later on, fishnet stockings, because everyone's got to have fishnets at some point. Next is Rocky Horror himself, Rocky the Creation, played by Peter Hinwood. So a very, very hunky white muscle man with a kind of a platinum blonde, almost a bowl cut. And Rocky is ripped, virtually no body fat on this man. So you see every single muscle on his body. And that's in part because he spends most of the movie in gold boots and very low riding gold underwear. That's his whole costume for most of the movie. And he kind of shuffles around because he's newly born and hasn't really figured out how to walk yet. He can flex, but he can't walk, nor can he sing, by the way. They had to get someone else in to do his singing for him. He was good looking, but didn't have the chops to sing. And then there's Meatloaf, Eddie. This is the jacket that I'm wearing. So Eddie is a thick, beefy white guy with a greasy dark hair and mutton chop sideburns, and wears a leather vest like the one I'm wearing with the leopard fur lapels and kind of ratty old blue jeans. He comes in riding a motorcycle, carries a saxophone, and has a big, long, raw scar horizontally across his forehead. This is a scar, it later becomes evident, that was left on his head when half of his brain was removed to make Rocky. That's why he's still got this raw scar across his forehead. So that's Eddie Meatloaf. And then we get Charles Gray as the criminologist. So the criminologist is like the narrator of the really, it was the narrator in the play because you needed transitions so the actors could change costumes, but they kept it. They kept the character for the film. And his scenes are all shot separately in a formal library or like a private office or something. And he speaks directly to camera. He speaks directly to us. He's an older silver-haired white man who furrows his brows and wears a dark gray suit and a red kind of ascot. So that's the narrator, the criminologist. Then they're the Transylvanians. So these are the conventioneers who are at the castle. They act like the chorus and they're the background dancers throughout the movie. They're oddballs. They wear tuxedos, sunglasses, and party hats. But really, most importantly, Tim Curry as Dr. Frank Infurter, the eccentric transvestite scientist. Now, I should note that the transvestite is very much an out-of-date term. That's, should be said, but it is how the character very clearly identifies. And it's the title of the biggest number in the movie. And transvestite also works into the sci-fi world that they've got. There's transsexual Transylvania, and transvestite is part of this sci-fi world. So we're obviously going to keep using transvestite, but I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm aware of the fact that it is in other contexts very much an out-of-date term. But so Tim Curry, who plays Dr. Frankenfurter, a fairly lean young white man, muscular but lean, with a big dark curly hair, almost goes down to his shoulders, and a mouthful of teeth on Tim Curry. He's got a tattoo high on his right arm up near the shoulder. It's a heart with a sword through it, with the title Boss written above the heart in this imperfect cursive lettering.
Hey, JJ, do we know if that's a real tattoo? Is that a real Tim Curry tattoo, or is it a Frankenfurter tattoo?
I think that's a Frankenfurter one, but that's a really good question. I haven't, I haven't seen him without his shirt in most of his other roles. In The Hunt for Red October, he didn't like pull off the pull the shirt down over the shoulder for, just didn't happen. So. But Tim Curry's got a bit of body hair, leg hair in particular, which is interesting because of the fishnets. With fishnets, of course, the body hair comes straight through, and Tim Curry had lots of leg hair. And his makeup is kind of iconic, right? Pale powdered face, glossy red lips with a thin black outline, dark purple eyeshadow that goes all the way up to very curvy, expressive eyebrows. And his primary costume is a sparkly black corset vest that's laced up the front. And he's got matching fingerless gloves that go up to the elbows and a matching garter belt. He's wearing black panties and thigh-high fishnet stockings, chunky black and white sequined high-heeled shoes, and of course a choker of oversized white pearls. But, even with the makeup and the lingerie, I did want to make sure that I point out that Frank is by no means he's not a pristinely made up character. He's not prim and pris. He is rough and tumble. That's the character's look. He's raw. He is a wild and an untamed thing. He's a cigarette smoking, muscular, hard gazing man who wears pearls, black lame corsets, and ripped fishnets over his hairy legs, right? He is not so much a man trying to dress up or to become a woman. This is not that kind of classic drag situation. Frank is his own creature. He's an alien, and he revels in pleasure and desire. And that's where this costume comes from. It's not so much, this isn't the kind of drag that we're often presented with. Certainly not the kind of drag that the mainstream audience was presented with a lot in the 70s. It's part of this kind of rough, raw, it's still very masculine male kind of characterization. And again, it's part of the wardrobe of his alien race, the people who hail from transsexual Transylvania. So that's all Frank. Frank is, oh God, Frank is fantastic. I like you, Amy.
I want to be Frank.
I want to be Frank. Who doesn't want to be Frank
And you know
oh,
what's nice about this particular character, and you know, the world that we're in, of course, is a fun kind of eccentric world, but there's been a lot of talk today about the idea of the misfit.
yeah,
And Frankenfurter is the misfit. Like, you know, he's come to Earth. He doesn't fit in. He's got his own jam. And that's really relatable for many folks. So when you go and experience this, you're like, I'm a misfit too, and I'm proud to be a misfit.
that's right.
And that was a really, for me as a teenager, was something that I thought was like really gravitational to this kind of content.
Totally. You could really let your
All of the
freak flag
characters,
fly at Rocky. You know, you could be your own weirdo, and kind of any kind of weirdo was accepted.
All are welcome.
Yeah, everyone was welcome, whether you were, even if you were a straight-laced weirdo, that's fine. You can be that weirdo too. Like that's totally cool. Come on in,
Brad.
Yeah, totally. Whatever your bent is, right? However you like to roam, Rocky's open. So
I think, you know, when you talk about the term transvestite being out of date, I think that's probably one of the reasons why we kind of let that go today for the Rocky Horror Show. And I'm sure, you know, for some folks it isn't something that they can let go, but for many folks it's like they just sort of overlook that because it's about the intent, right?
Exactly.
The intent is not to harm or to do harm. The intent is to be who you are, and that's something to be celebrated.
Very much. And this is a movie that fully celebrates, you know, giving yourself over to pleasure, but also giving yourself over to whoever it is that you are. Yeah. So it absolutely. I think you're right, Amy. It's you know, in the parlance of the times, it hasn't been canceled because it is still, even if the terminology isn't necessarily in line with the way we phrase things now, the intent is absolutely relevant and still very, very open and warm and engaging, I think, for sure.
Awesome. Oh, we're gonna get into some musical clips here.
Awesome. So
I'm really excited about that.
Should we just like describe our way through the film? Like, go through this movie kind of scene by scene, and as we come to some of the great musical numbers, I'll set them up and then we can play them. Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So the movie opens, as I've referenced a couple of times, the movie opens at a wedding that Brad and Janet are attending. And after the wedding, Brad and Janet declare their love for each other in song. Brad proposes to Janet. They sing and dance through the church, but they also spend time in the cemetery beside the church. And as they dance about, there are three somber members of the church staff who are preparing for the next event, which is a funeral. So they turn colorful flowers that were on display for the wedding, and they turn them around, and now they're black, dead flowers. And then they carry out a coffin, all while Brad and Janet are singing their love song to each other. And visually, this is like a little bit of a little bit of foreshadowing. Those three somber church members are played by the actors who play Riff Raff, Magenta, and Columbia. So they are in that scene. And in fact, just before the musical number Dammit Janet starts, there's a group photo for the wedding, and the priest who's standing at the back of the photo is actually Tim Curry in a silent little moment, who's standing for the photo. So just, you know, a few of those little actors sprinkled in. So that's what we're going to play first. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that at all.
There you go. So we'll play Dammit Janet now, and that's the basic setup. It's just after the wedding, dancing around outside the church and in the church. Here's Dammit Janet.
All right.
Due to copyright restrictions, excerpts of this presentation have not been recorded. Please check below for more information, including links to the material if it is hosted elsewhere.
Damn it! I love it! How can you not love that? Awesome.
Such a wonderful. So like we're only 2 minutes into the movie when that song starts. So we're off to a good start. After Dammit Janet, the criminologist comes on, the narrator comes on basically to provide some exposition. He looks directly at us into the camera and explains who Brad and Janet are. And he's got this big, large, like a leather-bound book that contains police reports and photographic evidence. And as he's flipping through, he explains that Brad and Janet then drove off to see their former teacher, Dr. Scott. So this was going to be their journey. They were going to go tell their former teacher and friend, Dr. Scott, that they were getting engaged. And then we cut to Brad and Janet driving down a dark, tree-lined road on a rainy night. They come to a dead end. It's a very mysterious dead end. They don't understand. They must have taken the wrong road. And so they start to back up so they could get back on the main road. And as they're backing up, they pop a tire. They get a flat tire. And what are they going to do? Well, they remember passing a castle back on the road. And so they decide, we will go out into the rain and we will go to this castle and find a phone and call for help. So this is the scene when the squirt guns come out and Janet holds the newspaper over her head. We get another song. There's a light. And then they arrive at the castle and it's Riff Raff who answers the door. Hello, he opens the door and he's very super creepy, of course. And he lets them inside. It's a strange event. Why are this castle is really super creepy on the inside. It's old, it's crumbling. There's a dimly lit, the wallpaper is peeling. There are cobwebs all over the dark wood. There are taxidermied animals around. There's even a grandfather clock made out of a coffin, and it's an occupied coffin. There's a skeleton inside. And then for no real reason, except that it's the greatest song that they've got in the entire catalog, they break out into song. And it's a very strange moment, but they break out into the time warp. So Riff Raff and his sister Magenta break into song, and the time warp is awesome. During the song, Brad and Janet are chased into the castle ballroom, where they find the annual Transylvanian convention in full swing. And the Transylvanians, like I mentioned, these are the oddballs in tuxedos, the sunglasses and party hats. And they, for most of the movie, they act as like the chorus and the background dancers. This is where we meet Columbia sitting on top of a jukebox. At some point during the time warp, she actually gets up and dances. She tap dances for us. And, obviously the time warp is a dance, and it's a dance that has been now done at weddings, in high school dances, every Halloween party. And the instructions are kind of in the song. And the way it works is the narrator, the criminologist, will explain. He'll give you it's just a jump to the left, and then the Transylvanians, they demonstrate for us. So we get the explanation and then the demonstration. If you want, we can go through that a little bit and give people an idea we can provide some extra dance instruction if you'd like, Amy, so that folks can, dance along at home if they so desire.
I'd love it. For folks who've never seen or experienced what the time warp is like, I think we can make some space for that.
Awesome. All right. So if you are interested in doing this at home, the time warp starts with a jump to the left. So if you're feeling like a pro, what you can do, instead of just like jumping to the left, you can start with your arms above your head, your hands in the air, and kind of waggle your hands as you bring them down, as if you're miming that rain is falling on you, and you kind of shimmy your hips a little bit. So it's just a jump to the left, and then after you jump to the left, you kind of do this little shimmy. Very good, Amy, beauty. And then it's a step to the right. So the simplest step to the right is you just step to the right. But again, if you're feeling kind of pro, you can step to the right. That's the way the song is sung, and so you can kind of get like put your foot in, out, in, out, in, out, in a little bit. It's just a step to the right.
A little like square dance nod almost.
Exactly. Yeah. You just give a little bit of back and forth there, and you can. Then it's put your hands on your hips. And so again, you can just put your hands on your hips, but if you want, you can be dramatic about it. So put your arms up over your head, spread them wide and open, bring your hands to your hips and slap them onto your hips. And then you bring your knees in tight. So bringing your knees in tight, it's kind of like a little semi-crouch. So you pull your knees so your knees are touching. Maybe you want to point your toes in a little bit if that's a little bit more comfortable. So now your knees are in tight, your hands are on your hips, and then it's a pelvic thrust that's really going to drive you insane. Everyone knows how to do their own personal pelvic thrust, but as it's going to really drive you insane, then you can rotate your hips in a wide circle. So it's
almost
a pelvic
like a hula,
thrust.
like a hula.
Exactly, like a
Okay.
little bit of a hula action. And then let's do the time warp again. So that is the basic time warp. Every time it's played, you can do exactly that. Mostly that's what the Transylvanians are doing. There are some other little bits where you can, throw your arms in the air and do whatever kind of dance, other kind of dances you want. But when it comes to, it's a jump to the left, step to the right, hands on your hips, bring your knees in tight. It's a pelvic thrust. It's going to drive you insane. Let's do the time warp again.
Awesome.
Awesome. Shall we do it?
Let's do it.
Awesome.
I want to see some chair dancing there, JJ.
Due to copyright restrictions, excerpts of this presentation have not been recorded. Please check below for more information, including links to the material if it is hosted elsewhere.
Whew. Well, that was my exercise for the day.
Oh, man. Yeah, if there was any chance that my kids thought I was cool, if they caught me just dancing around in the basement by myself, there's no way. It's over. It's over.
Oh, what a blast from the past.
I love that.
Love it. So much fun. I hope folks danced with us. We were doing the time warp, JJ and I, but y'all can keep that secret to yourself. Maybe share it later.
That's right. That's right. Oh, that felt good.
It felt awesome. Yeah.
All right. So Brad and Janet watching the time warp, all the conventioneers doing, the Transylvanians are doing it. The Colombia's tap dancing, flopping to the floor. The way the song ends, all the Transylvanians literally sink to the floor and flop exhausted to the ground. Mm-hmm. Brad and Janet try to back out of the room because this is a very strange and uncomfortable situation. So as they're backing out of the room, they back right into this old cage elevator, this black steel cage elevator, and they are stopped behind them by a cloaked figure in a black cape with the high silver sequined collar, Dr. Frank Enfurter. So Frank marches into the ballroom and stands before a silver gilt throne and tosses off his cape for the glorious reveal of the black sparkling lingerie that we described earlier. And really, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is one of the great moments in cinematic history. Frank throwing off his cape. Oh, it's just glorious. And this is all during the song, the amazing number Sweet Transvestite. So this song, there's lots of voguing, there's lots of strutting and posing in this number. And one of the iconic images from the movie comes from this scene where Frank is kind of lounging in this throne with his legs over one arm. Riff Raff and Magenta and Columbia are all posing around him. And that image right there, if you Google Rocky Horror Picture Show and do an image search, that's going to be one of the top ones that comes up. It's
almost a little bit like a strange family portrait.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. With Frank in all of his glory lounging across this throne. It's beautiful. So Sweet Transvestite comes right on the heels of the time warp. So we can play that now and just bask in the glory of Tim Curry and Sweet Tea.
Awesome.
Due to copyright restrictions, excerpts of this presentation have not been recorded. Please check below for more information, including links to the material if it is hosted elsewhere.
With anticipation. That's one of my favorite parts of that song. I love it.
So good. So good. So Frank leaves in the same, old cage elevator that he arrived in. He just sweeps in, sings his number, gets back in the elevator and leaves again. But as the song indicates at the end, he's invited Brad and Janet up to his lab. So Riff Raff and Magenta help Brad and Janet with their wet clothes. Very kind of them. They help them by removing them. So they strip them down to their underwear, as we described earlier, and everyone heads up to the lab. And when they get to the lab, Frankenfurter is now wearing a green surgical gown and pink dishwashing gloves over his lingerie. And this is where he's going to unveil his mummy, who is floating in a tank of water. Very cheesy special effects in this little bit. With Riff Raff's help, he very dramatically dribbles colorful paint from this overhead steam-powered contraption. He dribbles paint into the tank while lights are flashing and there are strange beeping sound effects, terribly cheesy. And Brad and Janet and all the Transylvanians are looking on as the mummy stands, and then his face is unveiled and he is this hunky blonde man, this gorgeous model with a terrible, terrible singing voice. His voice was so bad that they had to have it dubbed over by a musical theater performer who had played the title role in an Australian production of Jesus Christ Superstar. So that's who they found to sing the songs instead of the beautiful muscle man of Rocky. So Rocky bursts out into song, the sword of Damocles hanging over his head as his bandages are cut off and pulled off and his extraordinary physique is revealed. And when he's done singing, Frank then performs the song, I Can Make You a Man. So he gives Rocky a set of weights as a birthday gift. And so he flexes with the weights and, you know, he pumps iron a little bit while Frank sings, I Can Make You a Man. And just as that song is wrapping up, there's a deep freezer as part of the laboratory, and there's the laboratory deep freezer alarm starts to beep, and the big red steel freezer door comes crashing to the ground, and Eddie bursts out riding a motorcycle. And I got a little side story here. I mentioned that I'd seen a live production of this at the Bathurst Street Theatre in Toronto. And for that production, Eddie actually had a Harley that he came out on stage with the Harley revving. So the engine was on and he was supposed to just push it out onto the stage, and he popped the clutch and the motorcycle took off, flew across the stage, crashed into the scaffolding that they had to get to the second level. The motorcycle almost fell off the stage. Frankenfurter runs to the front of the stage, holds up his arms and says, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take 10 minutes. Please, everyone head to the lobby. Everyone left the theater. They had to rebuild part of the set. They had to haul the motorcycle off, and then they reset the scene, and they did it again without the motorcycle. Never seen anything like it.
And I bet you they never used the motorcycle like that again.
Yeah, seriously. What a chaotic moment. So wow. in the movie, it is a chaotic moment anyway. So, you know, Eddie comes bursting out on his motorcycle. Chaos ensues. Frank is livid, but Columbia's really happy because Eddie is her boyfriend. And so she's really, oh, my boyfriend has finally come back. And he sings his song. He performs his song. It's a great song, but it's really confusing lyrics. There's a lot of going on, a lot of exposition that's packed into very fast lyrics. So just to, you know, give you the rundown in terms of following the plot, it's important to know that Eddie was a delivery man who was bringing things to the castle. Columbia fell in love with him, and that made Frank jealous. So Frank stuffed Eddie into the freezer and took half of his brain to make Rocky. So Eddie dances with Columbia. The Transylvanians get in on it. They dance. Eddie rides his motorcycle all around the lab, but Frankenfurter is furious. So Frank chases Eddie back into the freezer, armed with a pickaxe. And that's the song Hot Patootie, which we can play.
And just so folks know from a visual perspective, like, you know, we hear him attack Eddie with a pickaxe, but we don't see that, right? It's part of the campy, like, you know, and this story that you told us about him being a delivery man, we don't see any of that in any of the visuals. It's just part of the backstory, right? So
exactly, some of that comes out in the lyrics, yeah. But really buried. And that's absolutely right. He chases him back into the freezer, and you hear screams. Columbia's screaming. It's upsetting and chaotic. But the only thing you see visually is Frank then exiting the freezer after the screaming has died down, and now his green surgical gown is spattered with blood and gore, but you don't actually see anything other than
and it's not even really overly spattered to my
no, it's just
right? It's just like a hint of it. So
it's camp. It's not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's Hot Patootie.
Hot Patootie. Here we go.
Due to copyright restrictions, excerpts of this presentation have not been recorded. Please check below for more information, including links to the material if it is hosted elsewhere.
And that's a really great example too of that handheld
Yes.
camera thing that you were talking about, because as soon as Eddie starts to run from Frankenfurter, it's like this handheld camera action, almost Blair Witchy project kind of unsteady movement. Yeah.
Exactly.
Just
Like
add to the
first
camera.
person, you're the
Yeah.
camera is the one chasing him around. Right. And so like, how are you going to get that backstory from those lyrics? I mean,
Yeah.
it's mostly just an ode to Columbia, but that's what's basically what's going on in that scene. So after
I love that you shared that, JJ, because I actually didn't know some of that stuff. So for me, it's, again, this is the example of sometimes you sing stuff and you'd have no idea what it is you're actually referring to. So
Yeah.
There you go. I love the context.
I probably saw the movie like 30 times, had loved it, and had no idea what was going on in that scene, except I think they were a couple at some point. Why Frank's angry about that, I don't know, but he is. Yeah. So that's the way it goes.
Well, because he's by night, he's one hell of a lover and he doesn't care what your expression is. That's right. He's going to jump you.
That's right. So after he does away with Eddie, stuffs him back into the freezer with his pickaxe, he comes back out. Frank then sings, he continues his ode to Rocky and finishes up his I Can Make You a Man song. And then confetti is thrown once again, this time because Frank and Rocky are making their way to their bridal suite. And so they get a little bit of a send-off from the Transylvanians. And then we cut to the criminologist, the narrator, for a little bit of a sum up. He sums up what's been going on and lets us know that Brad and Janet are taken to separate bedrooms. And we get to see a little bit of them being taken to separate bedrooms. But what we really get is the next number when they're lying in bed. We get two scenes, one after the other. First, Janet lying in bed, then Brad lying in bed. And these are Brad and Janet, each are in their own separate canopy bed in their separate rooms. So their canopy beds are surrounded by gauzy, translucent fabric. And first, Frank seduces Janet by slipping into her bed, pretending to be Brad. So uses Brad's voice to slip into bed and start to seduce Janet. And then he reveals himself to be Frankenfurter, and she lets him stick around for a little bit, but only if he doesn't tell Brad. And then the next scene, we get Frankenfurter slipping into Brad's bed, pretending to be Janet, using the Janet's voice, but then revealing himself to be Frankenfurter. And Brad's, oh my goodness, how could you? I never would. And he says, but you kind of love it, don't you? Well, and eventually they negotiate a little moment in bed together, but only if you promise not to tell Janet. But the visuals for these, it's all filmed with through these sheer the curtains, the gauzy translucent,
kind of in
fabric.
Shadow.
That's right. Everything's like silhouetted inside the bed. Really well done. Very fun. So each Brad and Janet, then Brad gets seduced by Frank. But meanwhile, Rocky, who was chained up in his bridal suite, escapes and flees, is running around the castle, running all over the castle grounds. And oh my God, chaos, because Rocky is broken free. Zipping ahead a little bit, Janet is by herself now because Frank has gone off looking for Rocky, and Janet's by herself. She doesn't have Brad with her, and she doesn't know what to do. She starts to freak out. So she decides to sneak around the castle and find out, what she can. Where is she? Oh my God, what's she going to do? And while she's sneaking around the castle by herself, she finds Rocky the Muscle Man hiding in the lab. And she is kind of, a little bit turned on by Rocky the Muscle Man, and she asks him to touch her. And unbeknownst to them, while they're having their little playtime in the lab, Magenta and Columbia are having a sleepover in another room in the castle, and they are watching Janet and Rocky do their thing in the lab. So they're having a little bit of a voyeuristic moment of their own. So we've got Magenta and Columbia in one space having a sleepover, watching Janet and Rocky do their thing in the lab. Oh my goodness, very salacious. And then later, when Frank discovers that Rocky's missing, he starts freaking out. But oh my God, there's a new problem because Dr. Scott has arrived. So Dr. Scott was the old science teacher that Brad and Janet were originally going to visit. And for some strange reason, he has shown up at the castle unannounced. Brad sees him on a security monitor and thinks it's a very pleasant surprise. Oh my goodness, it's my old science teacher. But Frankenfurter happens to know that this old science teacher is in fact a UFO investigator. So Frank decides that they should sort all of this out by having a dinner party together. So they go to a dark dining room under a massive chandelier, and there's a big formal dinner table with a red tablecloth, and Frank carves a roast with an electric carving knife, and all the cutlery is kind of mismatched, even though it's formal. It's a little bit creepy, a little bit weird. And there at the dinner table, Dr. Scott reveals in song that he was summoned to the castle by a letter scrawled in blood from his nephew, who is Eddie. So Frank is furious about this whole scene because he sings this song about Eddie, and it's kind of tender, and he doesn't like that Eddie is getting this tender moment. So Frank gets up, grabs the red tablecloth, and yanks everything off the table and reveals that underneath this glass tabletop is a coffin containing Eddie's mangled body. And it's a great reveal, except for the fact that the mannequin of Eddie is awful. It's just so cheesy. It's terrible special effects. It looks clearly like a mannequin, and the mannequin doesn't look anything like.
But it's meant to.
But it's meant to.
Yeah.
Oh yes, it's
They're not trying to hide anything from us. Yeah,
that's right. So Brad and Janet and Dr. Scott are so upset they flee the dining room. Frank chases them into the lab, and he makes them stick to the floor using his sonic transducer, which is just a red lever on the wall that makes a zapping noise when you pull it, and it sticks them to the floor. Dr. Scott confronts them and accuses Frankenfurter of being an alien with a nefarious plan. Sort of. It's a really vague monologue. It's very strange. So Frank then flips another lever that's labeled Medusa, and one by one he turns all of these characters into naked stone statues. So Janet, Brad, Dr. Scott all get turned into naked stone statues, and then Columbia finally gets fed up and she yells at Frank because Frank has killed her boyfriend. And so he turns her into stone too, and why not turn Rocky into stone as well? So now all of those characters are turned into naked stone statue versions of themselves. Then the criminologist, the narrator, pontificates. This is strictly to allow a costume change in the stage production. I remember this very clearly. And then Frank dresses all of these stone statues into versions. He dresses them up in versions of his own costume. So laced up strapless corsets, garter belts, fishnet stockings, and white face paint with exaggerated makeup, and then arranges them all on a stage. So the castle has a theater in it, and he arranges them all. Of course, I mean, every good haunted castle has to have a theater with a proscenium stage and whatnot. So he arranges all of these dressed up statues on a stage backed by a curtain, and then one at a time unzaps them. This is the floor show, and each one of these main characters performs a sexy dance with a feather boa, as if in some kind of under like a mind control or something, and they provide a synopsis of their role in the play and their character arc. The writing's a little bit clunky, but their dances are wonderful. Columbia, she struts around really owning her corset and her boa. Rocky stomps about because he still hasn't quite figured out how to use his limbs. Brad twitches. He is so perplexed by his own sexy actions. He's literally shaking as he performs this sexy dance. Janet begins to purr. She fully embraces her newfound sexual freedom. And then a spotlight comes up on Frankenfurter, who's at the back of the stage, and he's wearing a red and black version of his usual lingerie. And he's standing in front of a logo for the RKO radio pictures. This would have been the opening image for a lot of old B movies in the day. The RKO radio picture logo, which features a steel lattice hydro transmission tower. And this image, like I say, is found on the beginning of a lot of old B movies. And then Frank sings an ode to pleasure and carnal instincts, and he implores all of the others to drop their inhibitions. He then jumps off the stage and into a pool, which no one knew was on the stage, but it was. So he jumps into a pool and he floats around in this life preserver, singing this repeated line, "Don't dream it, be it. Don't dream it, be it." And Columbia, Brad, Janet, and Rocky, they all join him in the pool, and they writhe about in this tangle of wet lingerie-clad bodies. They are kissing each other, and they're nibbling each other in ecstasy. Meanwhile, backstage, Dr. Scott gets unzapped, and he tries at first to resist his sexual urges, but alas, he cannot. And while still seated in his wheelchair under his tartan blanket, he raises and then begins to stroke his leg, revealing his own fishnet stocking and high-heeled shoes. So this underwater orgy then turns into the fantastic party song Wild and Untamed Thing. And everyone hops out of the pool, they form a kick line, and they dance back and forth with their lingerie dripping, their makeup is running. Dr. Scott is wheeling back and forth behind them and in front of them, kicking his legs in the air, clicking his heels together. It is a sexy, hot mess of a dance number. And then at the end of it, Riff Raff and Magenta burst in, wearing gold padded spacesuits with huge flared black shoulders and thigh-high fishnet stockings, of course. And Riff Raff is brandishing a pitchfork-shaped ray gun and aims it at Frank and says, "It's all over. It's all over. It's done." And this is the song Wild and an Untamed Thing, which we can play for you now. This is the big climactic end number at the end of the floor show. Wild and an Untamed Thing.
Here we go.
Due to copyright restrictions, excerpts of this presentation have not been recorded. Please check below for more information, including links to the material if it is hosted elsewhere.
Oh God, and then what happens right after that, JJ? You're on mute.
Unmute. Perfect.
Perfect.
So Frank sings a delusional farewell song. He sings a farewell song called "I'm Going Home," and he imagines this theater packed with his adoring fans, but it's just a delusion. No one's there. He's soggy, he's wet, and it's over. Riff Raff tells Frank, "Sorry, I think I misspoke. You're not going to go back to the planet of Transylvania. Only we're going back." Columbia screams. Riff Raff spins and shoots her with his antimatter laser gun. And the special effects here are basically someone took a marker and drew zigzagging lines from the gun onto the film. It's, again, very B movie from the 1940s. And so Columbia gets shot down. Frank tries to escape by climbing the curtain, which is a terrible way to escape because there's nowhere to go but up, and then you got to fall back down again, which is actually exactly what happens when Riff Raff shoots him in the back. Frank comes crashing down. Rocky howls and growls in rage, and he picks Frank up and starts to carry him away. Riff Raff tries to shoot Rocky, but the laser beams bounce off of his muscular chest and back. So Rocky puts Frank on his back, and he begins to climb the RKO hydro tower that's at the back of the stage. They get to the top, but then the tower comes crashing down. They fall into the pool. Both of them are dead. Riff Raff then goes over to Brad and Janet and Dr. Scott, and he warns them that it's time for them to leave because we're about to blast off. He shoos them away. And then alone left on the stage, Riff Raff and Magenta maniacally recite the lyrics to the Time Warp, which was clearly some kind of song or that would get them back to their home world. They delight in the knowledge that they will soon be able to do the Time Warp with their fellow Transylvanians once again. And as Brad and Janet help carry Dr. Scott outside, a rainbow appears over the late evening sky over the castle. Smoke starts to billow from the foundations of the castle, and the castle lifts off and flies away. And that is more or less how the Rocky Horror Picture Show ends. And we have talked our way, we have described our way from beginning to end. What a glorious thing to have an opportunity to do. That is the Rocky Horror Picture Show in all of its glory.
You know, we would have loved to have shown every song, of course, in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Although, to be honest with you, when trying to find some of these clips on YouTube, they were really hard to find.
Yeah.
So, you know, we found what we could find in order to share with folks. And I want to talk about this moment where you're talking about, you know, Rocky picking up Frankenfurter and climbing up the tower, because to me, that's a very iconic Godzilla type moment, right? Where Godzilla's got his beauty queen in his arms and they climb up the tower to
Exactly.
There's all these homages that are so great.
All of these homages, right? The tower itself being used from the RKO, but really it's a stand-in for the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
That's right. And Rocky the monster carrying the beautiful woman. In this case, it's the beautiful Frank up to the top. And there are some little things like that too, like the pitchfork-shaped ray gun that Riff Raff holds. Actually, at the very beginning of the movie, when they were at the church, Riff Raff, as the somber church worker, actually held a pitchfork in hand. So they bring in a few of those little visuals.
And that's really an homage to, what's that famous painting?
That's right, where they're standing side by side.
The two couples with the husband and wife kind of dressed. American Gothic. American Gothic.
That's right.
Yeah, with the pitchfork. So there's that homage in there too.
You got it. You nailed it. That's exactly. So they're pulling in all of those visuals, and when you're seeing this live in theater, probably some of these things are easier to spot because there's a limited number of props. But they do it for the movie too, and you do as you watch it, 30, 40, 50, 100 times, you do start to spot a few of these things that they've carried in right to the end.
Easter eggs.
Exactly. Easter eggs before it was such a thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. This has been fun, and we held a little audio clip to the very end so that folks had some context, because we've shown a lot of stuff from the movie, but we wanted to just share we have a 45-minute clip, so we're going to just share a little segment of what it's like to, I'll let you set it up because you found the clip, so you set it up.
Yeah, so I think this was an audio recording from the New York cast, or from the New York screening. So, you would go to the movie theater, there's a shadow cast, the audience is yelling and screaming, and someone said, we got to record this. And so they recorded it. And this is a recording of the audience watching the movie in the movie theater. And so the scene is right at the very back at the beginning of the movie, right after the wedding. This is the last few minutes where Brad is declaring his love for Janet, and they're just about to get into Dammit Janet. So this is Brad and Janet outside the church in the cemetery, and this is some of the audience riffing back and forth with the dialogue in the on screen. So it's a little bit raw. Yes, content warning here for those who have sensitive ears.
And obviously this is just an audio clip. This is not a visual clip like we've been sharing. So this is audio only. So Rick, when you're ready, you can play our audience participation experience.
Brad, wasn't it wonderful? Didn't Betty look radiantly beautiful? Oh, I can't believe it. An hour ago, she was plain old Betty Monroe, and now she's Mrs. Ralph Hapshat.
Hapshat! Yes, Janet, Ralph's a lucky guy.
No, he's not.
She's got sick.
I always cry at weddings.
So do I, honey. Everyone knows that Betty's a wonderful little cook.
Yes.
Why, Ralph himself, he'll be in line for a promotion in a year or two.
Yes.
Hey, Janet. I've got something to say. I really love the... skillful way. You beat the other girls to the bride's bouquet.
The river was deep, but I swam it. Janet. The future
right.
is ours, so let's plan it.
Thanks for that, Rick, because we've heard Dammit Janet from the top of the show. But that gives you a little idea of what the audience, like what it's like to be in the audience. And JJ, I remember you saying right off the top too, that, if you're going to experience this for the first time in this kind of environment, like it's going to be impossible to understand what's happening on the screen and to participate. And, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't go. I think JJ's having trouble unmuting again. So let's support him. There you go.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about that clip is it shows, or you can hear sometimes there are lines that everyone in the audience is screaming, and sometimes there are one-offs that just one or two people are yelling because they've brought their own line, they've got their own thing. Yeah, it's chaos. If that's what it sounds like when you first arrive, it's the first time you've ever seen this movie, it's virtually impossible to follow. And if you're a description user, there are no gaps for the describer to get in there and describe what's going on, because those gaps are all filled by the audience members who are yelling and screaming at the screen. So a chaotic experience, but hopefully, truly, if you do get a chance to go, if anyone here gets a chance to go to a live performance or a live screening with or without a shadow cast, and having had this experience, hopefully some of the the odd things and some of the things that would be left aside because you couldn't follow, some of that will be filled in, and you have a basic idea of the costumes, basic idea of the look, so that you can enjoy and fully engage with the experience of being there, because that's really what it is. It's about being there.
Yeah.
Totally.
This has been great, JJ. We're going to sort of transition into a part of our live Q&A. And I know that there are folks in this space that have experienced Rocky Horror and have stories that they'd want to share. Friends, if you have questions that you want to ask of JJ or myself, we've already got a hand, JJ. We've already got a hand. This hand is from Tammy. So Tammy, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself? Let's give Tammy a moment.
Hi.
There we go.
Hi,
Tammy.
Hello. Yes, I have memories of Rocky Horror more through my older sister. I was maybe a bit too young to go in the 70s to Rocky Horror. I probably could have gone in the 80s, but I didn't. But my sister would constantly play Sweet Transvestite and Time Warp at home on the record player. So yeah.
Do you know the dance then, Tammy? Do you know the dance?
No, I don't really, but she used to play those two songs consistently. But my question though is, when you go to the movie, are you given like a little script on what to yell, from the audience? Because it seemed like everybody was like you said, there were some one-offs, but people were just like in unison yelling stuff. And I'm thinking, like, do you get like a little script, or like, how do you know what to say, or do you just kind of wing it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So in my experience, I started to go, and there wasn't, the only thing that was available was that soundtrack that we just heard a clip of. If you could get a hold of that album or that CD, you could listen to to the experience, and you could pick up a few lines. If you've never been to the Rocky Horror Show, you are officially called a virgin. And there's usually an MC who stands up at the front and says, how many virgins have we got here tonight? And people, throw up their hands and yell and scream, and we're going to de-virginate everybody. It's just absurd. And so usually you're there with a friend, or you're there with a group of people. You probably know a few things, like one or two, like when this character comes on, you yell this. When that character comes on, you yell that. And if you know 2 or 3 small things, you can feel like you're participating. And then it just takes going again and again and again, and that's how you start to build up your knowledge. And now I mean, it's amazing. It's been 30 years since I've been going regularly, and you know, I watched clips in preparation for this, but as we were listening to those songs, I was just immediately falling back into my old ways. I could lip sync every word, and I was kind of mumbling a few swear words under my under my mouth and under my breath, as you know, some of those things, they just get they just burrow their way into your brain, and it's just repetition really is all. But I've never seen a physical script. It would be helpful, wouldn't it? I mean,
yes, it would.
It's a bit chaotic.
The only other thing I'll say before I mute is that I didn't know till fairly recently that Susan Sarandon was in it. And I'm telling you, like, I'm just amazed at, like, people got to start somewhere, right? Because she's definitely, you know, gone on to some big roles. So it's just really interesting to hear some of the names of the people that were in there, because yeah, I mean, a lot of people have gone on.
Tim Curry too. Yeah.
And Tim Curry, yeah. And who played there was, I think it was it Magenta? One of the characters, I don't think you said who it was. I think it was either Columbia or Magenta. I can't remember.
Columbia. So Patricia Quinn was Magenta, and Nell.
Yeah, it's Columbia.
Yeah. Nell Campbell was credited as Little Nell, who is Columbia, and she was a stage actor. She was in the original. A number of the actors for the film were part of the original stage production as well. And Nell Campbell, Little Nell, was one of them.
Well, that makes sense, considering that the character that the guy that plays the character Riff Raff was the one who wrote the original, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was his
so
script.
He's gonna bring his peeps, maybe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the really, really clear description of everything. It was great. It really put things into a lot of into context for me. So
me too.
Much. Awesome. Thanks, Tammy.
Thanks, Tammy. Okay, we got a huge number of hands here, JJ. So we're gonna go to Karen next.
Well, I've got a huge smile on my face.
I can hear it in your voice, Karen.
Oh my gosh, JJ, Amy, and Rick, this is just such a fabulous gift you have given myself and all of us for Halloween. I feel really blessed. Thank you so much. JJ, your descriptive was incredible. Amy, your enthusiasm.
Thank you.
And technical, Rick, I'm just like, you brought me back to my childhood. And my story, actually, JJ, you might be able to appreciate this. 75, 76 AM radio, Rocky Horror Picture Show. The songs were on a loop. It was fabulous to listen to when it started taking off, probably in 76 more so. I was probably 12 or 13. I think maybe 13, 76, when my neighbor and the brother of my sister's best friend, still to this day, Jeff, it came to me, and it was I think it'd been snowing out, and we were outside playing in the snow and jumping around. He was about 3 years older than me, and we were doing, you know, the dance and jump to the left, and I mean, we were all up in our snowsuits having a great time, and Jeff said, let's go to the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I'm going tonight. Come with me.
Awesome.
And of course, he's old enough to drive. And I'm 13, probably grade 12, maybe grade 7, grade 8. And of course, I'm absolutely thrilled. And my mom will allow me to have no part of this. Absolutely no part of it.
Yeah.
And Jeff is the sweetest, kindest fellow. But, you know, I'm sure she knew what it was about. Of which, you know, I was definitely a virgin and clearly did not. So still to this day, I have not forgotten how upset I was. And even at midnight when I was still up, I was like, Jeff's there and I'm not. And
I'm not.
I was
Oh,
having a great time.
big
And
in my heart.
so missed out. And I still remember it so vividly to this day. So your children, yeah, I think probably a bit too young, because there's no way I would have let any three of my boys go at that age. And when it comes on, I'm still jumping around dancing in my kitchen, and they join right in, and we all have a great time. And yes, tonight I was dancing.
Were you doing the time
awesome.
warp?
Yeah, I sure was. You bet.
Fantastic.
And thank you so much for that, because that was so much fun. I am just so full of joy right now. And I want to know, JJ and Rick and Amy, when our pandemic's over, will you be going again in the near future? And also, JJ, would you consider maybe going into theater again and maybe getting back up on that stage?
Shadow cast.
Yeah, I think that would be great to see you as Eddie again.
I would love it. I mean, if I could go and it was going to be like rowdy, and I wouldn't want to go to a prim version at this point. I would want to try and go back to where it was gritty and raw and get into it and yell and scream. And, you know, I'm a graybeard now, literally. And so I would be happily in the theater yelling my heart out, and like all the young kids could look over their shoulder and go like, who's grandpa over there, you know, with the potty mouth? And I'd be absolutely pleased to do so. And as far as getting back on stage, you know, I would love to do that. And, you know, after pandemic, it's one of those things I have considered, like, what are some things I can do after the pandemic to reconnect with people and to reconnect with arts and shared community projects, and being on stage in a number of different ways, and, you know, in different plays and anything. I'm down with that idea. I think that's a good one. I appreciate the nudge.
Maybe locally, folks, like, you know, this Halloween is probably going to be too short notice, but maybe next Halloween there'll be groups of blind folks that just get together locally in their areas and go see the Rocky Horror Picture Show at midnight.
Oh,
I'd be down for a field trip. Yeah.
Totally. I'd love to like play it in a park or something like that. Put a screen up in the park, and, you know, everyone can get in their costumes, and might be a little chilly in your lingerie. Yeah.
Well, with all that jumping and dancing, you'll heal up.
Warm up.
You stay
and at
warm.
least you get to bring your own snacks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Your rice, you can bring popcorn, you can bring toast.
You can bring your toast. Exactly. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Karen, for sharing the memory.
Thanks for the fun night.
Oh, thank you so much. Madam Yale has a question.
Oh, that was fun. Thank you.
You stayed up.
I did. I did. I couldn't not. I got hooked again, and it always, honestly, I've owned a copy of Rocky Horror since there were things such as black market beta tapes. Wow. So I still have that one somewhere, black market. Then when it came out on VHS, I bought it the first weekend it was out. And I think I have it on DVD as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But I was trying to think of what memory. Well, first of all, my mom hated whenever my cousin and I would go, because confetti gets into everything, and no matter how much you think you've gotten rid of it before you come in the house, you haven't. It just stays.
You need a decontamination chamber before
you
you get in the house.
You do. Yeah. But I think my favorite memory was my cousin and I. So she was 18 at the time and I was 16. And we did the unthinkable of taking my mother, her aunt, to a midnight performance of Rocky Horror on a Friday night at the Roxy. And when they jumped into I'll never forget this, they jumped into the pool and my mother cracked up. She just started to laugh. She just, it was, oh my God. Oh, I'll never forget. It was so funny. It was just awesome. Watching her reactions to the movie, where it was was almost better than just, being part of
Yeah.
the audience. And for anyone who wants that audience participation CD, it's called the Rocky Horror Picture Show, or RHPS Audience Participation Album.
That's it.
Awesome.
And it's available on I have it on vinyl, I think, as well as I think I have it on CD somewhere.
That's fantastic. My mom still complains because when I desperately wanted it when it first came out on VHS, and she was going to New York on a just a trip, and I said, I think it's available in the States, it's not available in Canada, can you get it? And she had to shell out, she still remembers and complains about it to this day. I paid $69 for that VHS tape.
I only paid $20
a lot for a VHS tape.
It was a lot. It was a special release, only available. Oh yeah. No, I was pretty desperate.
I bought mine in Detroit. We just happened to go visit my cousins the weekend that it came out. I remember buying it there. Oh my, I love Rocky Horror. I remember going. One of my favorite parts is when he says, "I'll show you my favorite obsession," and the midnight version of our local theater company's production of it 5 years ago. I was the only one that yelled out "sex."
Awesome. So
I can't wait. So we're having a replay of a video that they took of the production 5 years ago, and I can't wait to see if part of it was from that midnight show where I was.
Yeah. And you'll hear yourself.
Listening for your own soundbite.
Awesome. That's just gonna be hilarious. I can't wait. So that's this Saturday. But thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
And friends, I hope you stick around to listen to Memories, and we have a prize draw at the end too. So if you're still on the call, you're eligible for that. But let's take another
I'm awake already.
You're awake already. Awesome.
Might as well stick around for the rest of the thing.
Awesome. Amber Joy has a hand. So why don't you go ahead and unmute? Looks like you're already unmuted.
I'm Regina. I wanted to thank you guys very much. I love Rocky Horror. It's my favorite. I was 7 the first time I saw Rocky Horror. My parents had no qualms. I wanted to watch it. I was allowed, so I was 7 the first time I saw Rocky Horror, and I could sing most of the songs. And my parents were more than a little bit embarrassed because I would go to school and sing them, and then all my teachers knew the kinds of things that I would watch. It gets even better because then I proceeded to go to Bible college, because where do you send your blind daughter? Well, Bible college is safe, right? So you send her to Bible college, where I had to do a movement piece. So I chose the Time Warp as my movement piece, which much to my teacher's chagrin, because they didn't know what to do when I booted up the boom box and Time Warp started, because they didn't know what piece I'd been practicing. And what could they do but give me an A, because I choreographed it perfectly. So
awesome.
I got an A on Time Warp at Bible college.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But that pelvic thrust is what could they do? Because there was no guidelines, because it wasn't specifically dirty enough. That they give me an A because it choreographed well and hit all of the tick boxes on their movement piece.
Awesome, Amber. That's
fantastic.
Awesome.
Just memories of Rocky Horror. But I wanted to tell you guys, I wanted to mention on the whatever anniversary DVD release of Rocky Horror, it was either the DVD release or when they came out with the new one. One of the bonus features is an audience participation, so you can watch it on the DVD. And then if you type in script, like audience participation script, you can download the entire script. It tells you when to say what. It's 36 pages of extra crap you have to say, and it tells you when to say it.
Perfect.
And so if you want to memorize it and be prepared to go to the show, you totally can, but it takes a lot of paper to print it.
Well, not only that, I mean, you could play it in your living room. I mean, I may not throw toast literally in my living room because I'll probably not find it for a year.
That's
but
right.
It's in the rice, right?
Exactly. And what's really cool is here in Regina, the player group that does it, it's mostly university kids who put it on. And they actually sell, like as part of a fundraiser, they give money to something you go in, you can pay $5 and pay for an audience participation kit.
Yeah.
You can't bring your own props, but you pay $5 for a brown paper bag, and it has like 12 things in it for audience participation. And they give you a little script with it that says what you can
Cool.
yell and when to use your props. Like you can
That's
yell other
great.
stuff, of course. Like you can yell all the raunchy stuff, but it's like kind of like all the more G-rated stuff. So like one about the rain and one about the coast and like a card for sorrow, a card for pain, and and you get a little water gun filled with water. Like they give you all the more safer props because they got sick of cleaning up confetti and toast. So this was their like solution around it.
It's awesome. It's
That's
a great idea.
That's a good, that's
so
good.
much because
Good fundraiser.
it was so good. And I've never watched Rocky Horror with DVS. I just by a fluke, I just never have. But I've watched Rocky Horror honestly probably 50 times, but never with DVS, and I can't see super well. And I was just saying to my partner, I was like, Eddie comes out of the freezer. Eddie was in the freezer. Hold on, Eddie has Eddie always been in the freezer? And he's like, yes, that's what
every time.
And I'm like, I thought it was rain. He's like, you thought it was, so thank you for telling me.
Yeah, it's nice to have somebody. Yeah,
Eddie was in the freezer because I had no idea. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
I really appreciated it.
That's
Thanks,
great.
Amber, for sharing your memories.
Cheers.
Thank you guys so much.
We've got a hand from Jean. You're up, my friend. And welcome. I think this is your first time here. Give Jean a moment to unmute.
This is absolutely been sensational. This is Karen in Toronto. I've actually done this.
Ah.
A bunch of friends of mine and their parents, because we practiced before we went to make sure that I had memorized all of the audience responses and I could participate with everybody else. Like a couple of them had done it like 3 or 4, 5 or 6 times in a row and remembered all the responses. So before, it was like my best friend Susan and her parents and a couple other friends of mine from high school and me. And they do it at midnight. And this is in Arkansas. This is before I came to Canada. And in order to make sure that, even though I had like 2,200 vision at the time, in order to make sure I could participate, we practiced the entire film ahead of time. So that I could memorize all the audience responses and when to throw the toast and how to do the time warp and all that. So this has been really great to revisit the entire experience of, and I'm curious, considering how long it's been around, has anybody translated Rocky Horror Picture Show into Spanish or into French or into Arabic so that other cultures could appreciate the entire experience too? Anybody know?
That's a really good question. I know it plays internationally, but I don't know if it plays just with the English or if it's dubbed at all. That's a really good question. Amy, do you know?
I have no idea. I bet it probably has.
I hope they have. It's such a rite of passage, and it's just even if you don't know how to, you don't know everything that's going on. Just being around a bunch of people and sharing the participatory experience is unbelievable. We had a blast. We had an absolute blast. And my friends went to a lot of trouble to make sure I could take part too. But I think it would be cool if somebody had gone to the trouble to translate, because it's like, here's a taste of Western culture.
And
that it is very hard to duplicate.
there is something about being in that environment with everyone, being as wild and wacky and untamed and unhinged as they want to be. Being in that environment really is, and I love the phrase "rite of passage." It is a right, like it does feel like that. You've hit a certain age, you want to rebel a little bit, and you want to dress up in some ridiculous outfit, whether it's Halloween or not. You can, get dressed up. You can put your strangest self forward. It's a great experience. So yeah,
it is.
It would be interesting to know. I know it does play all around the world. But in English or not, it's a good. I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm gonna look that up later for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
it is. Thanks for putting this together, because this has just been like memory lane with a capital M. Just to remember how great it was to do at the time. And sing along, of course.
Sing along and dance along. That's right.
Thanks so
Thanks
much.
a lot.
Okay, let's go back here because I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce this name, friends. So it's either Jean Marcel or Jean Marcel. New to the space this evening, but we do have a hand from this individual. So if you'd like to unmute yourself and participate, it is your turn to share your thoughts or your comments or your questions.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Welcome to the space. And
Thank you.
just tell me how do I pronounce your name?
Yeah, it's actually Jean Marcel, but everybody, you can call me JM. Pretty much everybody does.
Cool.
So
nice to meet you.
You too. This is the first time I've come in here, so this was actually very cool. Just wanted to say thanks for putting this on, JJ. That was really interesting. I'm also a Toronto person, but I wasn't born till 1980, so I kind of missed the the initial Rocky Horror experience. Now, I mean, I just wanted to. Some things are kind of interesting to me because, I didn't actually see the movie till my 20s, but I was always into, the old horror and sci-fi movies. So I kind of, in a way, a lot of the jokes and the kind of references and stuff like that are sort of part of the reason why I think the movie is cool. Everything from like the 30s Universal movies to like 1970s grindhouse and exploitation, like I'm all about that. That's like sort of, I have hundreds and hundreds of these movies, so yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, so a lot of those deep cut references would be things that I'm sure you're picking up on, stuff that I'm not picking up on. And I like some of those old things, but there's a lot of deep cut references and specific images that get pulled in and lines. I mean, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really funny because I came to the Rocky Horror Picture Show a little bit late, and when I first watched the movie, I'd already seen a lot of the older B movies and stuff. And the very first thing my ex and I noticed when we were watching the movie was, "Oh, hey, that's Charles Gray. He's the evil Satanist from The Devil Rides Out." And I was like, so. That was really cool. And
there's another Easter egg for you, Dan. That's awesome.
Yeah, the evil Satanist Makata. And so I think something that I find interesting is I actually learned something today. I don't know if I maybe knew this at one point or not, but I don't know that I really realized that it was originally a stage play. And that actually makes a lot of sense to me. Something that's never brought up, but there is an actual tradition in Britain called pantomime, and it's sort of like, where it involves a lot of audience participation and it involves a lot of use of tropes that everybody would recognize.
Yeah.
And I don't think, they didn't go all out with scripts and stuff like that. This is, sort of a tradition going back like a few hundred years. So it's been around for a long time, and it could get pretty raunchy. And usually it's like very simple responses that the audience would make and stuff like that. And I feel like now that I understand that it was originally play, I think that's the tradition that it's calling from, is the old pantomime tradition. And yeah, they didn't really have scripts for the most part, I think, but the audience just sort of knew what to say. And especially if you go to these things a lot, what kind of responses to give. And I mean, obviously, people who are not Rocky Horror virgins, they've been to this a lot. They don't need a script. They already know, right? So it's just really interesting to realize that it was drawing on that tradition. And I'm curious to know what the original play was like now, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very, very similar. The original script, I think, was called "They Came from Denton High," and basically plays out in the same way. I mean, the translation from stage to screen is so similar. Like, they kept that narrator, even though they didn't really need to. It really was a necessary for for changing sets and getting a little bit of exposition out there during when so much is happening in the musical numbers. But they kept that, they translated it straight, and with all the performers going, most of the performers going from the stage right onto the screen. Tim Curry, I mean, it's hard to imagine the movie not being Tim Curry. It's
no way.
Art, it's him. It's so him. It was an interesting translation, and they've tried doing it in they had the TV version a few years ago.
Yeah, I heard that wasn't very good.
Yeah, it's a little G-rated and TV. I mean, really,
Yeah, no.
just play the movie. It's already done and it's already great. There's no need to muck around, you know.
And what's interesting about it, you know how I mean, I'm a child of the 80s too, MJ, so I totally get this, but like all of these 80 movies have been redone, like Footloose and Carrie, and you know, these are like classics from the 80s. And so it's like every 30 years they try and reinvent a movie. I mean, what's the one that Barbara oh come on, the big named the one that Lady Gaga just did?
Yeah.
But it was like, it's been done like, you know, every 30 years. I can't remember the name of that movie at this moment.
Bradley Cooper and
anyways, but nobody has redone Rocky Horror as a remake,
as a film. They did they did the TV version. Well, you know what's funny, they keep trying to do it, like the TV show Glee, they had a Rocky Horror episode. And so it gets brought up, it's referenced in all kinds of other things. Costumes will appear in a TV show, a Halloween episode, someone will dress up as a costume from Rocky Horror, so it's constantly referenced. But
I think there's just too much pressure. There's like too much pressure to do a remake because you just can't top this.
I think the only way to do a remake would be like a touring live stage musical. I don't think they would do a movie remake because
I can't imagine it either. It just
wouldn't. The original's still playing in the theaters, and if you want to
just
go see it, you know.
Well, not only that, but like all you could really do is duplicate the original. Like if it's like, well, we got to go raunchier and we got to go more extreme, it would be very obvious that was what they were doing, and they were trying to outdo it. And then if they went less, it would be like, well, that's really phony compared to the original. It's not as hot. So
well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope we hear you and see you on another Wednesday night. But thanks for sharing your memories. That's really great, Jay. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Jay.
Cool. This was a fun session.
Yeah, we like to think that we have a little bit of fun in this space. We've got a whole list of hands here, friends. So I'm just gonna let you know who's up. So we've got Josette, then we've got Ruth, then we've got Megan, then Anthony, then Tilo and Yuko, and then Lori. And we're probably gonna have to draw a line under it there, friends, because I think that'll take us maybe even over time. But let's have Josette unmute and share your thoughts or your comments or your questions.
I thoroughly enjoyed the description. I said earlier on that I actually had not seen the movie, but I feel like I have because I am a science fiction and horror fan like John is from a way back in the 50s. And, you know, I got a lot of the references in regard to a lot of those. And also at our local science fiction convention, VCon, there was some rip-off stuff done. What they would do is they had something called the turkey readings on the final Sunday of the convention, and they would pull up all these horrible science fiction books with short stories in them, and they would have people act the various parts in the books. And I know all that came from Rocky Horror, but it was a lot of fun, and you know, there was audience participation like there was in Rocky Horror. But anyway, I really enjoyed the description, and I just cracked up all through your description because it's so badly done that it's funny. You know, I mean, I love spoofs. I just do. And another bad movie that they used to show at the cons was Plan 9 from Outer Space, which was it was just as bad. And Bela Lugosi was actually in that silly movie.
Yeah. Ed Wood, that's an Ed Wood. That's a fantastic, terrible movie. I mean, probably the best terrible movie of all time.
It's terrible. But anyway, thank you so much. I will definitely try and go to it in the future. And I do have the soundtrack. I've had the soundtrack ever since the movie came out. So
awesome.
Were you doing the time warp with us, Josette?
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, I tried to.
Awesome.
Well, thank you
All
so
jumps
much.
to the left
I
and little
thoroughly
snitch.
enjoyed it, and I just love horror stuff. So
Well, thank you.
Awesome.
It's the
Thanks
right
so
time
much.
of year for horror, that's for sure. Okay, Ruth, my friend, you're up.
Hello, thank
We
you.
can hear ya.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I actually have the DVD in English and French, so I can just say that it's in French for sure, which is really great. And I took my 16-year-old son for his 16th birthday to Rocky Horror Picture Show in Calgary at the Plaza Cinema. And he just thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. So obviously it's a movie that transcends the generations.
Yeah.
One of the things that always happened anytime I watched it is when the psychologist would be speaking, everybody in the audience would go, boring, boring. So I never heard what he said. So I'm wondering, did he just sort of, tell us what was happening as it was happening, or does he actually add some insights to the whole thing?
So it doesn't really add too much. Like there's a little bit of exposition explaining why something is happening, like why Brad and Janet are getting in their car and driving, and okay, so they're going to see Dr. Scott, and so explaining a little bit of that, and the flipping through of the book. There's some they're just kind of letting you know that that this story has unfolded, and it was some kind of case, a criminal case, an FBI case, because they've got files on this, and so it's mostly that. But really, you didn't miss a ton. Like there's not a ton of content. In fact, in the high school production that I was in, I was that character. I was the narrator. Among other things, and the final scene in the floor show, we just had the Wild and the Untamed thing, and it's the end of the song when Riff Raff is supposed to burst in with Magenta, and it's Frankenfurter, it's all over, your mission is a failure. And the way we had it set up was that Riff Raff and Magenta were supposed to burst in through the back of the auditorium. And so they had to go backstage, they had to go around the wings, they had to go into the lobby and come back through the front door. And they were high school students, and on their way in, a teacher stopped them and started getting mad at them for running in the hallways. And they missed their cue. And so they didn't come out in the middle of the song. They didn't come out to end it. And so I was the only one as the narrator who wasn't engaged in this dance on stage. So I just stood up and did more summarizing. What have we here? Frankenfurter and Janet and Brad and Columbia are in a tangle on stage, and this has happened here, and what's going to happen? And I just kept talking and talking until I saw Riff Raff and Magenta come, and I threw it to them, and what will happen next? And then they got to do it. So it was the perfect, from a stage production point of view, it was a perfect character to have. But from a movie point of view, it's okay to yell boring. You're not going to miss too much.
Well, thank you for that. And what a great personal experience you had with it on stage. That's fantastic. And I have to say that I always got the sense that the real show was the audience saying boring, boring, boring. So it was great. So thank you all, Amy, JJ, and Rick. That was really wonderful. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you. Megan has a hand. Come on in, Megan. Just give Megan a moment to unmute. Yeah, it's kind of sad at the end of the movie when it's like the end of Frankenfurter, and I always have that little moment of like, oh, really? Okay, I just gotta start it over again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just go back, hit play one more time.
Hit play one more time.
Yeah.
I go.
Oh, there we go. We've got Megan.
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was so cool. I actually like the second that was the guy that came out from the state that was in his little cage elevator and coming down. That's kind of cool. I really love that. Who actually was the player about that?
So Frankenfurter, the actor who was playing that part, that's Tim Curry. And he's like just a legend. I mean, has been in a bunch of other things too. He did the movie Clue and did The Hunt for Red October. He popped up here and there. But I mean, I could never see Tim Curry and not see Frankenfurter.
It might actually have been like he might have been typecasted in a way.
Yeah,
and didn't
I mean,
allow him to do any big roles for other things.
Yeah. And there aren't that many opportunities for a
sweet transvestite.
Did he actually play in Fern Gully as well?
Oh, Fern Gully.
He might have been a voice. That was a animated, right? Fern Gully was animated.
Yeah.
So he might have been a voice of one of the characters because I think he does a lot of voice work.
Yeah, I think you're
He was
right.
the one that had
He's got a British accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the one that had those that had the little machine, and he had the slime everywhere on the trees going, and all that stuff around.
It could be, yeah.
Like when he does the trees cutting down.
He's just so wonderful. And you can find some old interview clips of him being interviewed in the very early days when the Rocky Horror was starting to be the phenomenon that it grew into. And it's kind of neat to watch him before he's a star, but he's clearly got a presence to him. He does carry himself a little bit like Frank in those days, even when he's not acting as Frankenfurter. He's got wonderful presence.
Megan, you're absolutely right. I just Googled it. So Tim Curry in the 1992 version of Fern Gully, the Last Rainforest, and his iconic song is
Toxic
Love.
Perfect Love. Yeah.
Toxic Love. There you go.
Yeah, Toxic
Good
Love.
ear.
Good ear. Very good.
Oh yeah. I remember now.
Awesome. Well, thanks
Thanks,
Megan.
Megan.
Well, thank
for sharing your
you.
thoughts.
Thank you.
And our last hand this evening comes from the Tilo and Yuko duo. So I don't know who's going to appear, but we're going to find out. Is it Tilo?
Hello.
Hi, it's Tilo.
Hi. I knew the Rocky Horror Picture Show was originally a play, and I saw it on video a couple times, but I was not really a fan, and I've seen people outside the theater with their costumes. I think if I would have went in the theater and saw the people screaming all that, I think I probably would have been shocked because I probably wouldn't have understood what was going on.
Yeah.
So it's a good eye opener for me. So I understand this a little bit more. It's like some things of opera you need to be told before you understand. Yeah. So I'm very glad to hear people's experiences in that, and it's fun and it's more for the experience and stuff.
Would you go again if the opportunity came up? Would you give it a try?
Yeah, I would actually go to the movie theater.
Yeah.
I've only seen it on video.
Yeah.
That's the only time I've ever seen it. And I've actually have the vinyl, it sounds like, on YouTube. I picked it up from I listened to it from CNIB called Music for Mindfulness, and they gave a recap, and in the recap, because they played one of the songs on there, in the recap, when I allowed to play more, the whole album came up. So I started to listen to all of it. So I haven't listened to all of it. I got distracted. I wanted to listen to all of it before I came in, listen to this, so I can be more memorize it or have my memory refreshed, because I don't watch it or take part of it every Halloween, but this, I really like this.
Awesome.
That's great.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Oh, cheers. It's funny you mentioned this idea of of showing up, and like, what would happen if you just walked into the theater
and you had no idea
going on. Yeah,
exactly. I was telling my mom that I was doing this event, and my mom said, "Oh, did I ever tell you about the first time I went to the Rocky Horror?" And I never got this story when I was going as a teenager, but when my mom was a young woman and I was just born, her younger sister called her up and said, "Oh my God, Annie, you've got to go see this crazy movie. Come with me. So my mom was like, "Okay, I don't know what's going to happen." She just thought it was a funny movie. So my mom goes to the theater. This was at the Roxy in Toronto, and my mom took a friend, and they showed up. And my aunt, who had invited my mom, she didn't show up. She just didn't show because she was a crazy young hippie girl, and she didn't show up. On my mom. Yeah, she did. Yeah, back in the days, there was no cell phone. They couldn't text or call and say, "Where are you?" She just didn't show up. So my mom and her friend were like, "Well, I guess we're going in," and they went in having no idea what the movie was, having no experience with this whatsoever. She said the first half hour was terrifying, and the last hour was glorious. You know,
they've finally figured out and settled down. Yeah,
that's right. Once they kind of settled into the experience, it was wonderful and fantastic, and they had a good time. But
yeah.
But wow, I think it must have been pretty startling for the first half hour.
I think so. Because that's probably would have been me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well,
Awesome.
I'm sensing a field trip if it comes to local in the Vancouver area at some point. I'm gonna send a message out to the troops.
At least now I know if I go see it, I know exactly what's going on.
That's right. That's right.
Very much.
Thank you for sharing, Tilo.
It's my homework. Thank you.
I mean, JJ, what a fun night. What a great way to celebrate Halloween, if even only a few days earlier. But I'm really happy about tonight. So thanks so much for sharing space with us.
Oh, this has been fantastic.
My cheeks hurt.
I know.
My cheeks hurt.
I'm flying, I'm floating up here, you know, just like singing all these songs to myself and going over every bit of like every scene and remembering
You're gonna have a hard time falling asleep.
Oh, I know. I'm gonna be hopping around the house, really embarrassing my kids. You know, if they
that's okay. They can handle it. Even if that's their first introduction to Rocky Horror before they really get to experience it.
That's right.
You know, they'll have memories of that too, just like you shared your memory of your mom.
That's right. 20 years from now, they'll be on some Zoom call, some holographic Zoom call, talking about how embarrassing their dad was.
And there'll be a Frankenfurter avatar.
Yeah, totally.
Well, before we officially let you go, because it's tomorrow in Toronto, want to do a prize draw?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Let's bring Donna out to help with our prize draw.
I am here.
They're here. Here comes Donna. Donna, I'm going to leave you in JJ's hands, and everybody knows what's happening.
All right, JJ. I am shaking up some names. Okay. And at any point you want to scream something Rocky Horror related, I don't mind if you curse, but I don't know. It's up to you.
Well, how about I'll start with anticipation.
Nice. And it's Joe Bruno.
Oh, Joe, congratulations. You've won a raffle prize. Joe, we'll make sure that we connect with you by phone or email offline to get you your prize. So really cool. That's awesome. JJ,
hi.
Thank you. Oh, did I hear Joe? Was that Joe?
Yes, it is.
Joe,
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. So we'll send you some options of things that you can choose from, almost like a trick or treat. We'll get it to you.
Terrific. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. JJ, thanks so much for a fabulous night, for putting a smile on my face. I love Rocky Horror too. It's just so much fun to have you here in the space. You're welcome back anytime, as you know, and I'm sure this won't be the last time we see you in this space. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate it. I love you guys are always game, and it makes me happy every time I'm in your space. So thanks for having me.
Awesome.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.